"You're no longer needed," he said, like he was commenting on the weather and not gutting the last 11 years of my life. 6 days. That's how close I was to the finish line. 6 days away from the bonus I'd already bled for. Project completed, results delivered, contracts signed. It wasn't just a number on a spreadsheet. It was $68,000, my son's first semester at NYU, my mother's new hearing aids, and maybe, just maybe, a weekend where I didn't wake up at 4 a.m., grinding my teeth about expense reports. But no, Brian, my boss with the moral compass of a used car salesman and the haircut of a youth pastor, sat across from me in a glass box conference room and slid a beige folder toward me like it was a goddamn takeout menu. "Company-wide restructuring," he added, with a tone so oily I wanted to wipe my hands on the seat cushion. Restructuring. That word again. Always delivered by people who still get to keep their parking spot and a seat at the Christmas party. He tapped the paper. "Just sign here, Ellen." I looked down. A standard termination agreement, 3 weeks severance, positive reference letter, legal silence. My ears rang. My vision tunneled. But I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I didn't ask why me because I knew why. I was the highest paid department lead who wasn't part of Brian's little inner circle of overpaid interns and LinkedIn bros, the kind of circle where your GPA mattered more than your deliverables and ping pong tournaments replaced actual leadership. And he thought I'd just nod. Be grateful for 3 weeks of hush money. Walk quietly into the LinkedIn graveyard with a carefully worded "Exploring New Opportunities" post and a stock photo of a mountain. Instead, I smiled. God help me, I smiled. Because Brian had forgotten something. Something buried deep in legal jargon, nestled in a contract no one had reviewed in nearly a decade. Clause 14B, it was my idea, back when the company was small, hopeful, and run by people who still said thank you without legal prompting. It was meant to protect top performers, me included, from unjustified termination related to performance or redundancy. If activated, it guaranteed 15% of quarterly net profit. I'd added it myself during a renegotiation in 2015. The company lawyer at the time was new and overworked. Brian hadn't even been hired yet. Nobody noticed. Until now. So yes, I signed. In silence. And when he handed me the exit checklist like I was returning a library book, I said, "Pleasure working with you, Brian." His smirk? That was the last one I'd ever see. When I walked out of the conference room, the office floor looked like it always did. Gray carpets, dying ficus trees, people pretending not to watch. Only this time they were. Karen from sales paused mid-coffee pour. Marcus from IT glanced up but looked away just as fast. Everyone knew. They just didn't want to be next. I emptied my desk in 7 minutes flat. A photo of my son from his high school graduation. My favorite pen. 3 sticky notes with handwritten reminders from a life I was apparently no longer needed in. I didn't even cry. Not there. The tears came later. Alone in my car, parked under the same flickering streetlight that had guided my exhausted walk-ins for years. I gripped the wheel and sobbed, not just from grief, but from insult, from the knowledge that they planned this, that my name was scratched off some spreadsheet like expired milk. But underneath the sadness, a different emotion stirred. Something colder, sharper, because I wasn't beaten. Not yet. I went home, opened my laptop, and pulled out my original contract from a dusty folder labeled Important Docs. I found the clause, reread it 3 times, and laughed the kind of laugh that sounds more like a cough or a threat. It was still there. Still signed. Still valid. They owed me more than a bonus now. They owed me millions. And if Brian thought I was just going to go quietly, well, he really should have read the fine print. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was panicking. Those days were behind me. No, I was wired in a different way. like I'd been dunked in ice water and handed a blueprint for revenge. I sat at my kitchen table, robe half-tied, a cup of chamomile going cold beside me, as I highlighted every clause, every sentence in that dusty contract that was about to become my golden ticket. Clause 14B was clear. Crystal even. In the event of unjust termination not supported by formal documentation of underperformance or redundancy, the employee is entitled to 15% of the company's quarterly net profit. No fine print, no loopholes. I checked, cross-checked, even ran it through a contract analysis app just to be sure. They hadn't just fired me unjustly. They hadn't given any reason. No written warnings, no PIPs, just a beige folder and Brian's smug face. At 3:22 a.m., I called a name I hadn't said out loud in over a year. Jeremy Quinn. Jeremy was my former employment lawyer. He helped me negotiate this exact contract almost a decade ago when the company was still a lean startup with a CEO who used to hand out holiday cards and remember your kid's name. Jeremy was expensive, but he was sharp. The kind of lawyer who wrote emails like they were war plans. I sent a text. Need to review clause 14B. You were right to insist on it. He replied 3 minutes later. Still have the file. You're waking up my inner predator. Coffee tomorrow? I stared at his response, and for the first time since the firing, I smiled like I meant it. Jeremy met me at a downtown cafe near his firm's office. The kind of place where everyone wore Patagonia fleeces and talked about real estate over 6 oat milk lattes. He looked older, thinner, but his eyes were just as sharp. And when I handed him the contract, he didn't even blink. Oh, he said, flipping to the mark section. They're screwed. I raised an eyebrow. Don't get me wrong, he added. They'll fight this. Corporate always does. But unless they've got documented cause, we have them dead to rights. Any chance they gave you a written explanation for the firing? Not a word, I said. Just a vague, you're no longer needed, and that I was being let go due to restructuring. No warning, no poor reviews, just pink slip theater. Jeremy nodded, tapping his pen against the table. Then we hit them fast and quiet. No noise, no bluff. We go full legal within the week. You didn't sign away your rights in that severance document, right? I shook my head. It didn't mention the clause. I think Brian forgot it existed. Perfect, Jeremy said, eyes gleaming. We'll open with a formal demand letter. Certified. From a partner, not an associate. Makes it feel nuclear. We reference clause 14B and attach a clean scan of the signed contract. Then we sit back and wait for the panic. What if they try to make it look like they fired me for cause? I asked. Fake documents, backdated warnings. Jeremy smirked. Then we subpoena internal records, audit document creation dates, pull metadata from their SharePoint or Outlook systems. If they try to forge anything, we'll catch them. And if they don't try, even better. They'll want to settle. Fast. I nodded slowly, the weight of it all sinking in. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. This was real. And I wasn't alone in it. Jeremy leaned back. You know what pisses me off the most about this? I raised an eyebrow. They didn't even do it with dignity. They didn't treat you like a human being. Just a number, a cost line. That makes this personal. It was personal. For me, for my son, for every late night I'd spent running numbers while Brian took credit for my work in those all-hands meetings. I left the cafe feeling like something had shifted, like the ground under me had finally stopped moving. But I also knew I couldn't win this alone. I needed someone still inside the company. Someone who knew the numbers. Someone who had access to quarterly reports, bonus pools, and the executive conversations that never made it into email threads. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through contacts I hadn't touched in months. Past vendors, old interns, and finally, Erica Bloom, senior accountant. Smart, loyal, and definitely still pissed about being passed over for promotion 3 years in a row while Brian hired his buddy's cousin with a finance degree and a TikTok addiction. I typed, "Hey, can we talk? Something important and confidential." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared. "Yes, meet me tonight, but not near the office." That's when I knew. She already had something to say, and I was finally ready to listen. We met at a strip mall sushi place with flickering signage and a host who didn't look up once as we walked in. Erica was already seated in a back booth, hunched over her miso soup like it had offended her. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired you fix with sleep. The kind that settles in your bones after too many years of being overlooked, talked over, and politely ignored. She looked up when I slid in across from her. "No small talk," she said. "You texted me something about Brian and bonuses. Go, I appreciated that." No pretense. So I told her everything. The firing, the clause, Jeremy's plan, the demand letter, the eerie silence from Brian after I signed the paperwork without protest. When I mentioned Clause 14B, her eyes lit up like someone had just flipped a breaker inside her skull. "I knew there was something," she whispered. "They've been pushing us to finalize Q1 bonus calculations early. Like, really early. I mean, end of month early. And the only time they do that is when they're trying to lock something in before it changes." I leaned in. "Before what changes?" "Before someone sues, or leaks, or, you know, throws a wrench in the machine." She took a long sip of her water. Then she reached into her tote bag and pulled out a manila envelope, plain and unassuming. "I printed a few things," she said. Inside were 3 spreadsheets. Clean formatting. No scribbles. Numbers laid out like confessionals. One showed projected Q1 profits. Another, the bonus pool allocation for the executive team. The third, my favorite, was a payout forecast. Missing one line item. Mine. "Your name vanished last week," Erica said, voice low. "Just gone. Like you never existed. No notes, no revision tracking. Brian didn't even tell accounting you were being let go. He just emailed a new version of the sheet with your line missing and said, 'This one is final. Use this.'" I stared at the page. Under the column for strategic operations, where my bonus used to sit, was just a dash. "It's like they're laundering the money," she said, quietly reabsorbing it into the bonus pool. "I don't know how much you were due, but that amount, 68,000? It didn't vanish. It got reallocated. My guess? Split between Brian and 2 of the VPs. I didn't speak right away. My chest felt tight. Not angry. Not yet. Just heavy. "They didn't just fire me," I said. "They repackaged my work as someone else's bonus." Erica nodded. "Welcome to the machine." I swallowed hard. "How much is 15% of the Q1 profit projection?" She flipped to the second spreadsheet and tapped the cell with her finger. $2.6 million, she said flatly. I blinked. "That's their projected profit?" "After expenses, yes." I did the math in my head, then again just to be sure. 15% equals $390,000. That's what they owed me. Not $68,000, not hush money severance. Almost $400,000. Jeremy had been right. They were going to fight. But now I had more than a contract. I had evidence of intent. "Will you back me up?" I asked quietly. She hesitated. Not long, just enough for realism. "I'll help, carefully," she said. "But I need you to promise me one thing." "What's that?" "That if this goes public and I lose my job, you'll do everything you can to burn them down so hard no one else ever works under Brian again." I held out my hand. "Deal." She shook it. Later that night, I emailed Jeremy everything. The spreadsheets, the adjusted documents, a written statement from Erica marked confidential, describing how the payout allocation changed. His reply came at 2:08 a.m. This isn't just a bonus grab anymore. This is documented financial manipulation, misrepresentation to internal departments, maybe even fraud. We're moving to Phase 2. Phase 2 meant escalation. A formal demand letter delivered not just to HR, but directly to the board. Jeremy drafted it the next morning. It was cold, precise, full of legal landmines. Per Clause 14B of Ms. Ellen Brooks' employment contract, and in light of newly acquired internal financial records indicating misallocation of projected bonus payouts, we are formally requesting a payment of 15% of net Q1 profit. We reserve the right to pursue this in court if no resolution is reached within 7 business days. 7 days. That's all they'd have. Jeremy sent the letter by courier and email. Then we waited. But Brian didn't. He responded the next day with a carefully worded email and 2 attached PDFs. One, a performance warning dated 2 months ago. Another, a record of disciplinary action with my digital signature. I stared at the screen in silence. Jeremy, I said into the phone, I never saw these documents in my life, and that's not my signature. There was a pause. Then, well, he said calmly, now they've made a mistake. The PDFs sat open on my screen side by side. One was a formal performance warning, supposedly issued in February, citing vague nonsense like lack of leadership alignment and failure to demonstrate cross-functional synergy. The other was worse, a disciplinary notice for insubordination, dated just 3 weeks before I was let go. And at the bottom, a signature that was supposed to be mine. It wasn't. They used my full name, Ellen Marie Brooks, and typed it in a script font that barely looked human. No stroke pressure, no angle variation, just something slapped together in Microsoft Word like an afterthought. I stared at it for a long time, then called Jeremy. They forged my signature, I said, my voice flat. They created fake documents to justify the firing. There was a pause, and then I heard the faint rustle of him standing up. They panicked, he said. This is amateur, sloppy, and stupid. Did you ever sign anything electronically? Never for disciplinary actions. Never for anything HR-related. We were required to sign those in person, remember? With a witness from HR present. Perfect, he said. We request the metadata from the originals. Let's find out when they were actually created, and on whose computer. He was already drafting the subpoena request as we spoke. I barely slept that night. Not from fear. Those days were behind me, but from something deeper. Resolve. This wasn't just about a bonus anymore. It wasn't even about the $390,000 I was legally owed. This had turned into something much bigger. They tried to erase me. And when they couldn't, they tried to frame me. That kind of arrogance doesn't just go away on its own. It needs to be dragged into the light. 2 days later, Jeremy called. I answered on the first ring. We got the metadata, he said. Their legal team thought sending PDFs would slow us down, but our request went straight to IAT compliance. Someone over there clearly still has a soul. And? Both documents were created on Brian's laptop, March 25th, at 8:42 p.m. That's 5 days after they fired you. I blinked. So, not only forged, but created after your termination, which means they're not just unethical. They're falsifying records post-employment, which, depending on jurisdiction, could border on criminal. I could almost hear him smile through the phone. It's rare we get a clean shot like this, Ellen. They handed us a gift. At Jeremy's suggestion, we didn't confront them directly. Instead, he filed a quiet complaint with the company's external legal auditor. It's the kind of internal watchdog most execs forget about, until it bites them. Then he made one more call. to a journalist. Not just any journalist. Sarah Klein, a respected business reporter for a major online outlet. The kind of person who double-checks every source and doesn't flinch when threatened with a cease and desist. Jeremy sent her a teaser. Redacted versions of the forged documents, the contract clause, and a timeline of events. She called me personally within 12 hours. "I'm not here to sensationalize this," she said. "But if what you're alleging is true, this is a pattern. I've covered 3 similar cases in the last year. Firings right before bonus payouts, sudden restructurings with no documentation, and forged warnings to kill clauses like yours." I hesitated. "I'm not looking for fame. I'm not trying to burn the place down." "I get it," she said. "But this isn't just about you anymore. It's about accountability. If you let me write this, anonymously, if you want, I promise I'll protect your sources and stay fact-checked down to the ink." After a long pause, I said yes. She asked for one quote. I gave her this. "When people in power are allowed to rewrite history with a few keystrokes, everyone loses. This isn't about revenge. It's about truth." The article went live 3 days later. The title was brutal in its precision. Fired before the bonus, inside a corporate culture of quiet erasure. It didn't name the company. It didn't name Brian. But it didn't have to. The breadcrumbs were clear. And in the age of LinkedIn, the readers did the rest. By the end of the day, the post had over 18,000 shares, hundreds of comments, and one very panicked email from the company's general counsel asking if we could resolve this quickly. Jeremy told them we were still reviewing options. "We're not done yet," he said to me. Neither was I. Because the next morning, Erica texted me something that made my stomach flip. "They're shredding files. I just saw Brian take 2 binders marked executive compensation into the records room. Door was locked. Then he told the intern to take an early lunch. They were trying to erase the evidence. But it was already too late. We had what we needed. And now, we had an audience." When your enemies stop pretending, that's when the game changes. The morning after Sarah Klein's article dropped, I woke to 5 missed calls from unknown numbers and 1 voicemail from someone I hadn't heard from in almost a year. Robert Chang, one of the company's board members. Back when I was still useful to them, he'd once told me I was the quiet engine that keeps the train moving. Now I was a liability. The voicemail was short. "Ellen, I think it's in everyone's interest we speak directly. Please contact my assistant. We'd like to arrange a meeting. Discreetly." I forwarded the message to Jeremy. He didn't respond right away. Then, finally, "Let them come to us." In writing, an hour later, an email arrived from the company's outside counsel. Not the in-house team, but a big white shoe firm from downtown. Polite, vague, nervous. They requested a closed-door meeting between myself, my legal representation, and select members of senior leadership to reach a mutually beneficial resolution. Jeremy and I sat down later that day to prepare. The man showed up with 4 color-coded folders, a tablet full of timestamps, and a calm that made me feel dangerous. He looked across the table at me. "We're not just negotiating a payout, Ellen. We're negotiating your terms, your dignity, your message." "I'm not walking away with a check in silence," I said. He nodded. "Good, because the number I have in mind isn't based on your original bonus. It's based on everything they tried to bury." He opened the spreadsheet. Projected Q1 profit, $2.6 million, 15% per clause. 14B equals $390,000, plus penalties, legal fees, reputational damages. Jeremy's opening number, $625,000. I didn't breathe for a second. "They're going to flinch," I said quietly. "They're going to sweat," he corrected. "Then they're going to pay." The meeting was set for Friday at 10:30 a.m. in a sterile conference room on the 19th floor of a midtown legal office. The windows were too clean. the table too polished. Everything reeked of corporate damage control. Brian was already seated when we walked in. No tie, pale, hair freshly cut, probably to look professional for the board. He didn't look at me, just fiddled with a Mont Blanc pen and pretended to read from a blank legal pad. To his right was Marissa Lowell, head of HR. To his left, the company's general counsel, a man named Stewart, who looked like he chewed through non-disclosure agreements for breakfast. Jeremy and I sat across from them like we'd been planning this for months, which, in a way, we had. After brief introductions, Stewart cleared his throat. Ms. Brooks, our client is interested in resolving this situation without further escalation. We understand there may have been some confusion regarding your departure. I said nothing. Jeremy smiled like a shark in a pond. Let's be clear. Your client fired Ms. Brooks without cause, then submitted forged documents, then attempted to reallocate her bonus without disclosure. That's not confusion. That's calculated deception. Stewart's jaw twitched. We believe there's room to negotiate. Brian finally looked up. She was difficult, he said, voice tight. Always questioning my direction, resistant to change. Her performance? Jeremy held up a hand. We're not here to debate adjectives. We're here because you violated a legal contract. And now we're going to fix that. He slid a single-page document across the table. Settlement amount, $625,000 NDA terms. Limited. No disclosure of amount, but right to share experience anonymously. Admission of fault. None required non-retaliation clause. Included, Marissa exhaled like someone had punched her in the stomach. Brian's face turned bright red. Stewart asked for a private moment. We stepped out. In the hallway, Jeremy checked his watch. They'll counter, he said. But they know they're out of moves. If this goes to court, the forged docs alone could tank them. And if Sarah writes a follow-up with that metadata... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. 10 minutes later, we were called back in. Stewart's tone was clipped. Our client will agree to the financial terms, provided the NDA is slightly adjusted to limit third-party media discussions. Jeremy didn't even blink. Denied. The article already ran. Ellen retains the right to clarify or correct public record should it be necessary. More silence. Then a reluctant nod. It was done. They printed the agreement on the spot. I signed. Brian stared at me like he was waiting for me to gloat. I didn't. I just stood, gathered my things, and said, "You should have read the fine print." Jeremy and I walked out of that building with the signed agreement in hand and one last, quiet victory still ahead. Because the check hadn't hit my account yet. But something else had. Control. The wire hit my account on a Tuesday morning at 9:03 a.m. I was sitting at my kitchen table, same spot where I'd read through the contract weeks earlier, same cold mug of tea, same crack in the ceiling I still hadn't fixed. But this time, I didn't feel small. I felt finished. $625,000. Clean. Legal. Untouchable. I stared at the number for a long time, long enough that my banking app signed me out. When I logged back in just to make sure it was real, it still made my chest ache. Not because of the money, though, yes, that changed everything. But because I finally had something corporate never gives. Closure. Not the fake kind. Not a signed card or a half-hearted farewell email. The real kind. The kind you fight for. The kind you earn. I used the money the way you might expect. Paid off the mortgage, cleared my credit card debt. Set aside tuition for my son. He cried when I told him he wouldn't have to take out loans for sophomore year. Then I transferred $20,000 to Erica with a note that just said, "Thank you for not looking away." She called me 3 minutes later, sobbing. Said it was too much. Said she hadn't done it for the money. I told her I knew that. Which is why she deserved it. I also paid Jeremy's fee in full, then sent him a bottle of 25-year scotch with a note that read, "For the next client who's underestimated." 3 weeks passed. The company never released a statement, never admitted wrongdoing. That wasn't surprising. But Brian? He quietly resigned on a Friday afternoon. No announcement, no party, no explanation. Just an empty office and a deactivated email. I heard later that he tried to frame it as pursuing new opportunities. The irony nearly choked me. Rumors swirled for a while. Something about irregularities, audits, outside legal reviews. Erica said HR was interviewing staff about internal policy violations, and the board had hired a third-party firm to assess ethical leadership standards. In plain English, they were cleaning house. Quietly. Quiet like a cover-up. I thought that would be the end of it. Until one day I got a message on LinkedIn. It was from a woman named Carla, a senior analyst at another tech firm. She wrote, "Hi, Ellen. I read the anonymous quote in that article, and I think I know who you are. Just wanted to say thank you. I was let go from my last job under similar circumstances and thought I was crazy. Your story reminded me that I'm not." There were more messages after that. Dozens. From strangers, from women, from older employees, from people who had also been erased, dismissed, paper-trailed into silence. They didn't want revenge. They wanted to be seen. So I wrote a post. Not a name drop. Not a takedown. Just a story. About the quiet people who build companies. About the contracts no one reads until they matter. About what it means to walk away with your spine intact. It ended like this. Some bridges deserve to burn. Some doors are better closed. But your name? That's not negotiable. Protect it. Fight for it. Keep receipts. The post didn't go viral. Not right away. But it resonated. Because it was real. And sometimes real is louder than dramatic. People always think the best revenge is fire and fury. But honestly, the best revenge is survival. The best revenge is sitting on your back porch, 3 months later, with your mother in one chair and your son in another, sipping lemonade while the spring breeze runs through the trees. It's hearing your son say, "Mom, I'm proud of you." It's knowing you didn't burn your life down. You rebuilt it, brick by brick, clause by clause. And you didn't become like them. You stayed you. One day, months later, I passed that old office building. I was walking downtown after lunch with a former colleague. I paused across the street, looked up at the 12th floor window that used to be mine. It was dark, empty. Someone had removed the nameplate on the glass door. I didn't feel angry or sad. I just felt free. I turned to my friend and said, "Let's keep walking." Because the story was over. And the next one? I'd write it on my terms.